So now we come to the core of our chat application. Let's enable our users to chat with each other. But before that, I noticed that I forgot to place a / when pointing to the babel.min.js file in the chatroom.ejs and the room.ejs files. Since we are serving this script at the root, we need to access it like a route using a /. Not doing so can cause resolution errors when we deploy the app on the cloud. Okay, back to our chat functionality. In our chatroom.ejs page, we have an input field with the name user input. This is what the users will type their messages in before pressing enter to send it off to the room. So first, let's create a jQuery selector to this input field and cache it in a variable called chat input. I'm using the name, the tag type, and the attribute name as the keys to select this field conveniently, and you can see that jQuery makes this really simple in general. Now let's access this field using this selector variable, and we'll listen to the key up event. We want the user to press enter when he has to dispatch the message to the room instead of pressing any button on the UI. So I'll have to listen to the key up event first, which is observed whenever a user depresses a key on the keyboard. Also, notice here that I am not using an arrow function as the callback as I've done in the past. Can you guess why? Well, the reason I've done so is because in this callback, I need access to the this keyword. I'm sure you know the purpose of the this keyword in JavaScript. Here, it offers a way to access the context within which the event was fired. So if I were to use an arrow function, the problem is that I will not get access to the this keyword that refers to this input field. This is because arrow functions do not create a new this context unlike regular functions. Since I need the this keyword, as you'll see in a moment, I will have to use the function keyword. We are also accessing the event object that the event listener provides using the EVT variable. And using this, the first thing I'll do is type evt.prevent_default. This statement prevents the browser from executing the default set of actions when the user presses the enter key, for instance, in a text input field. We want to grab control from what the browser thinks it should do to what we want to do here using JavaScript. And evt.prevent_default instructs the browser to not react when the user is interacting with the element in context. To refer internally to the input field, I'll create a variable called message_fld and I'll use the jQuery selector on the this keyword. This selects the field so that we can fetch the value out of it. But we want the user to press enter when he wishes to dispatch the message. This can be achieved by using event or evt.which property, which provides us access to the key code or char code property that event listeners provide when a key is pressed. This would be a number, and if it is 13, then we can be sure that the user has indeed pressed the enter key. If this is true, and if the value of the input field is not empty, then we want to dispatch the message. And for dispatching the message, we'll use our familiar socket.emit to emit an event called new message, and for the payload, we'll send the room ID, user's name, and the profile pic URI followed by a key called message, which will carry the contents of our input field. We'll broadcast this message across to everyone in a given room. But as for the sender's message feed, we'll simply update that locally using a function that we will write in a second. Finally, we'll empty out the input field so that the user can proceed to typing another message. Now, back on the server, we'll listen for the new message event. And when that is received, we'll simply emit the message back as an event called inMessage to the room. Notice that I am using socket.to and not socket.broadcast.to. This is purely as an example. Feel free to use socket.to in all previous instances where we used socket.broadcast.to. That is all the transport functionality that we need for the chat feature. Now, for rendering the messages, we'll simply loop and replicate this block of HTML in the chatroom.ejs page. So, first up, let's select the parent container within which we'll render copies of this block. Then we'll write a function which does the job of updating the message feed. I'll call it update feed, and we'll simply pass in the user's profile pic URI and the message, because this is all we are rendering in the message feed. Inside, we'll first create a variable called template where we'll use the string literal notation to populate and render the HTML block like so. We only need to render the user pic and message properties. Once we have this, we'll select this HTML block by feeding it into the jQuery selector method. Then, using jQuery's hide method, we'll set its display CSS property to none. Then we'll prepend this in the chat messages div. The reason we are prepending and not appending is because this way recent messages will appear at the top rather than appear at the bottom. Finally, we'll chain a slide down method which will animate in every message over 200 milliseconds. In the key up event listener, we'll execute this method now to render the active user's pic and message directly into the message feed instead of doing a round trip over WebSockets. And for messages received from other users over the inMessage event, we'll simply receive the data, parse it from its stringified form, and we'll again run update feed, passing in the user pic and message properties like so. And that is it. Let's test this out. And you can see when I type a message and press enter, the message gently animates in across both user instances.